I just want to read a little from the introduction, which will hopefully give you a sense of my compulsions in writing the book, the area that I've drawn for myself by writing it. I start with a truism. I start with by stressing the importance of the PWA. When I say PWA, I mean the Progressive Writers Association, and when I say PWM, I refer to the Progressive Writers Movement. The significance of the Progressive Writers Movement is uncontested for most commentators on the literary history of India. It succeeded in bringing to its fold established and emerging writers from almost all the important languages in the Indian subcontinent. From almost its very inception, it succeeded in gaining the attention and blessings of the literary stalwarts of the time. Rabindranath Tagore, Muhammad Iqbal, Maulvi Abdul Haq, Hasrat Mohani, Acharya Narendra Dev, Tara Chand, and Sarojini Naidu, while belonging to diverse literary traditions, endorsed the PWM and its objectives. The eminent Hindi writer Prem Chand addressed the inaugural session of the Progressive Writers Association in Lucknow on 9 April 1936, and he virtually spelled out the agenda for the writers in a presidential address called Sahitya Ka Udesh. Now, the interesting thing about this presidential address, which I would like to believe was a kind of a turning point in Indian literature, was the fact that he was drawing the writer's attention to the very definition of beauty. He was trying to say, हमें खूबसूरती का मयार बदलना होगा. यानी फसाने और दास्तान में जो खूबसूरती, खासतौर से औरत की खूबसूरती का बयान था, यानी she is fair maiden with doe eyes and long hair, moon maiden. उन्होंने कहा वो ऐसी कहाँ होती हैं औरतें? खेत में काम करने वाली औरत जो अपना बच्चे को भी देख रही है, खेत में भी काम कर रही है और उसके माथे से पसीना है, खूबसूरती यहाँ पे भी है. These were his words, incidentally, and he goes on at length to describe ये भी खूबसूरती है, इस पे भी author को बात करने की जरूरत है. So I see this presidential address delivered in April 1936 as a very important beginning, not just of progressive writing, but of the movement and a new kind of writing, which marked a very sort of sharp break from what was expected of a creative writer. Some of the greatest Urdu writers were associated with the PWA, namely Faiz Ahmad Faiz, Sajjad Zahir, Ismat Chughtai, Krishan Chandar, Kaifi Azmi, and Ali Sardar Jafri, among others. The importance of this movement lies not merely in the intrinsic merits of the writers associated with it or their individual works. Let me point out that one has done different kinds of writing in the past. I have occasionally been a literary critic, but in writing this book, in this study, I was very consciously not trying to do a critique in purely literary terms. In fact, I was not very interested in evaluating the literary merit of the works that I was studying. I was consciously trying to adopt the role of a literary historian, which for me was a new role. So many of the works that I have chosen here, I won't have time to go into those, but I was really not interested in how good or bad they were in purely literary terms. I was more interested in locating them in a context, because for me, for this study, that context was very important. The PWM and its proponents were a powerful and inescapable force, commandeering a space for themselves in the political, social, and literary canvas of India for nearly 3 decades. In the book, and I'll try and say this here as well, while the study is concentrating on 3 decades, from the 30s to the 50s of the glory days, the high noon of the movement, I'm also devoting a lot of time to what led to that movement. My essential thesis is that this was not some exotic plant that was grafted from foreign climes and put into Indian soil. I spend a lot of time and effort in trying to establish how this was pretty much a native plant, as it were. The PWM penetrated into different Indian languages, most notably Urdu, Hindi, Bangla, Marathi, and Telugu. For the purpose of this literary history, my interest was in the Urdu writers and in the use of the acronyms PWM and PWA I was alluding to the words being used in Urdu, which were Taraqi Pasand Tehreek and Anjumani Taraqi Pasand Musannifin. Now, Praful is sitting here and he had major objections to my title. He said it's a gerund and you never begin with a gerund. The title is Liking Progress. Now, I must confess that I stuck to my guns despite his very firm disapproval, because gerund or no gerund, this is the closest I've been able to come to describing what is Taraqi Pasandi. In Urdu, it was Taraqi Pasandi. Progressivism is very close to it, but not quite it. Liking progress, or those who like progress, that is the closest to what the Urdu writers were referring to. I have also, in this study, chosen to use and interpret only Urdu writers, primarily because Urdu was, during the period of this study, the most widely used language. It was a tensile, growing, alive lingua franca of the people of Upper India. It was open to change and ideally suited to the expression of new, even radical ideas. The burst of political consciousness released from the events of 1857, the changes in distant parts of the world at the turn of the century, the Russian Revolution, and the consequent popularity of socialist thought, the rising nationalism, the growing anti-imperialist sentiments, all this and more found expression in the Urdu language. Urdu literature, therefore, as we come to the 30s, reflected a mind-boggling variety of styles, trends, and voices. I have attempted to look at Urdu literature, in most cases, the literature of the Indian Muslims, in the context of the events and happenings in India. Events that affected not Muslims alone, though my interest all along is on the effect on the Indian Muslims. I have devoted 2 chapters to providing a historical background to the emergence of socially engaged literature in Urdu from the late 19th century onwards, and I have also tried to set forth the diversity of responses among the Muslim intelligentsia to the events that shape this world. This again sort of tries to bust the stereotype that all responses among Muslim writers were of a kind. I've tried to say that no, there weren't. Even something like 1857, there was a spectrum of responses. It is not as though all Muslim writers or all of those writing in Urdu, the majority of whom happened to be Muslim, were reacting in a certain way. I have taken heed of Barbara Metcalfe's eloquent plea to write what she calls history of connections. Metcalfe has urged, and I'm quoting here, "We need scholars who, unlike my generation, do not study Muslims alone, and instead of creating differences, we need to draw boundaries around common social and political structures, situating Muslims squarely within the complex world of opportunities and constraints, motivations and tastes they shared with everyone else." Quote closes. While delineating the history of the PWM, I have attempted to posit the Muslim response to events at the national and international fronts. Essentially, I have looked at how events, not just in the Muslim world or the world of Islam in West Asia, but elsewhere in the world, was actually influencing the Urdu writers, and it was making them write in different ways, in both poetry and in prose. And we see this picking up from the 30s onwards. So whether it was the World War, whether it was the events in West Asia or elsewhere, or the rising, the awakening of Asia, which happened much later in the 50s, all of it was being picked up and responded to.